vamos a dar apertura a la tercera mesa, perdón, a la cuarta mesa, en el que vamos a hacer, pues, vamos a basarnos en cómo las TIC y el aprendizaje intergeneracional pueden empoderar a los jóvenes inmigrantes y a favorecer la comunicación intergeneracional. En esta mesa vamos a tener la participación de distintos profesores universitarios. Vamos a tener 15 minutos de participación para cada uno y luego abriremos un turno de palabra para que todas aquellas personas que estén interesadas pues podáis formular cuestiones, preguntas, dudas o cualquier otra cosa que queráis formular, ¿vale? Entonces vamos a dar la palabra en primer lugar a Mariusz Granosic de la Universidad de Łódź de Polonia.
I start as many of people start. It's a pleasure for me and a honor also to meet you and to discuss topics that are really interesting and important, I think, for not only for young and old, but for the societies, European societies. My title is very general, and I need maybe 2 days to tell some crucial point of the title. So I'm really sorry, but I present only very selected points that I found the most fitted into the topic. Contemporary challenges for empowerment and participatory youth work. Probably it will be nothing about participatory youth work, but maybe some challenges. I reduced the number of challenges to 1 per each type of empowerment. But I was asked to start with some information about myself. So I'm academics, but as far as I know, academic experiences are not recognized as a real practice. So I would like to mention that also I had been working as a social worker for more than 2 years, as a youth worker for more than 5 years, and also I worked in the house for elderly people. So I collected many experiences during my life, and I hope it gave me the right to tell something in the topic. I'm not paid by the project, so I'm independent and I can be critical to some extent. I think it's important to have some critical voice at the end of the project, to construct another project, maybe a bit different. Okay, let's start. Just to mention that empowerment can be recognized at three levels. I called it individual, social, and systemic levels. In many books you find other types of empowerment, but just to keep this one. Individual is when individual strengths are empowered. In this point, my idea was to tell something about Polish heritage of human strengths approach, but I skipped this, unfortunately, for our tradition. Only what I tell is that the tradition is 80 years long, 80 years. The other concept, there is resilience, a bit more psychological, or capacity approach developed last time by Hans-Uwe Otto from Germany. Social or community empowerment is when a group of people or community is empowered. It's also referred to some Polish tradition, but as well to concept of social capital, community development, community education approach, and so on. The last one, not so much developed, I think, is systemic, mostly referred to radical and critical social work or youth work as well. To make my presentation a bit shorter, I will combine first two types together. So what is the challenge, one chosen by me challenge of the individual and community empowerment? Is the way how we look for or how we find the individual capacity to be empowered. I think it's a crucial point because it's a starting point that decides what will be the next. And very often we reinforced what we find as promising. What we find, I mean researchers, practitioners, teachers. Sometimes we conduct some research, mostly based on questions that we raised. But we construct the research tools. We think what questions should be asked. And those who answer our question very often are very conscious what we expect, what kind of answer we expect. It is so-called communicative knowledge. But I think the challenge is to go a bit deeper, to not only ask people, but maybe to observe them, to learn something from the field. It is called sometimes conjunctive space of experience. If we use Karl Mannheim term, very old term, or tacit or latent knowledge, not important how we call it, but the idea is one, is the same, to find the real knowledge that is visible only when we observe someone's action, not what he or she is talking about, but what he or she is doing. It refers to such a theoretical concept like Lebenswelt, it's life word by Alfred Schutz, but developed. And very often it provides to construct jointly action called participatory action or participatory research assessment. I skip this academic blah blah, and I think the best way to present what I mean, to present my point, is to show it on examples. The examples are taken from the real life, not virtual, from the real life. So first, it's about older people. Yesterday, I learned that elderly or seniors is not politically correct because it's ageism. So I change in some places, but sorry that I'm not consequently politically correct. Oh yeah, seniors, oh my God. So seniors are very often expected something. In public discourse, for example, we can observe many advertisements with seniors who are very active, smiling. And it's the reason, one of many reasons, that we also expect seniors to be more active in physical sense of activity. And when we construct a project, we very often think to activate them, to move more, and ask this type of question. And sometimes they answer, yes, we would like to move a bit more, but there are some barriers. So we think, okay, we need to construct the project to overcome the barriers. This is the capacity that we plan to empower. but many narrative interviews, biographical narrative interviews, and a bit more interpretive reconstruction showed us that very often the real problem of older people is that they are not important part of the society. And being active is not a way how they can feel a bit more important in the society. So if we follow this instruction to look for conjunctive knowledge rather than communicative, we should focus on some other capacities. And what can be real capacities, for example? I think it's social experience. It's very unique. Only older people has this type of experience because you need to live many, many years to collect it. It's not a knowledge, it's wisdom. I don't know what word should be used, but I see the trouble combining knowledge society and the capacity of older people. I think that also the capacity of older people can be some sort of afraid. They are afraid of IT, informative technology, for example. And I very appreciate this afraid of. I'm afraid of sometimes also. Someone in the society should say, stop. Of course, the IT technology are very important, crucial, but it's not a whole life. It's not a way to create a family, to make some values. It doesn't mean that IT is not necessary. But I think that it's not the best way, considering older people. Okay, there are many oral history, another very important. It's probably it's time running so fast. Another, I think, very interesting. Oh, just minutes. Oh, 5. It's better to listen to you. Okay, oral history. Those who studied history knows that there's a new trend in historical research to conduct oral history research. And older people are the only one who can support us in this process, and in which we conducted such a project. Researchers go to the oldest people living in Łódź and ask them to tell the story, tell the history of the city. And they felt very important, the most important. If they die, no one can do this. But next slide, because it's something about young people. Example 2 is about migrants. Very often, they are expected to be less advanced in language skill. And improving language communicative skills seems to be sometimes the most important. But I would like to look from another side on the problem. And the inspiration was another narrative biographical interview with so-called Indian lady, is a nickname, of the Indian woman living in Wales. She improved linguistic skills so much that she speaks Welsh better than other neighbors. But still, she was corrected by them. For them was not possible that Indian lady, visible other, can speak better than they speak their own language. So it's not a direction to empower this this type of migrants. But what is a real capacity? And it's derived from another research conducted on so-called marginal men. I mean, people who are on the margin between two cultures, bilingual people, for example, and so on. The double cultural background is the capacity that is unique and very important for us. How much time I have? Okay, 1 minute. 2 minutes, right? I can give you more and more examples, but I think that my point is clear. So, what is the challenge of the systemic empowerment? First, the challenge is to construct and conduct projects at the level of social system, not only to work with individuals, with migrants, old people, because very often they are empowered, but society doesn't allow them to be active because of some structures. And I mentioned 3 levels of those structures, and I finish after those 3 levels. First is public discourse. Probably we don't recognize the power of public discourse. If we look into such theoretical concepts like Michel Foucault governmentality perspective or post-Foucaultian writers, we find that public discourse is forming our mind totally. So we think what is told. Poles. We Poles are afraid of migrants, but there are no migrants in Poland, relatively, no migrants. But we are afraid, all of us. We think what we will do when they come. But no one comes. Why we are afraid of? Because of public discourse. Okay, the second point is institutional level. One discourse is public, but another is institutional discourse. As far as I observed conducting my research, there is external and internal. Oh my God, I see that. So institutional discourse is also barrier very often. And the last and the last level is the conclusion that someone, before we start to empower minorities, we should empower practitioners, professionals who work with those people. Very often we have, because we are those professionals, we have lower social status, and it's really hard to be advocate of someone if you have no power. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marius. Muchas gracias y bueno, una pena que no tengamos tiempo más para poder discutir, pero bueno, cuando terminemos la reunión podemos hablar personalmente entre nosotros. Bueno, damos la palabra a continuación a las profesoras Elisa María Ramón Molina y Vaya Ortega Barrera de la Universidad de Las Palmas de Gran Canaria. No es un mal sitio para trabajar.
Morning. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So we came from Las Palmas University in the Canary Islands, and we came here because Johanna Lake invited us. So I'm going to tell you the story why we're here. It's not, because now after having listened all your presentation and the result of the project, so I still wonder why I'm here, but I try to figure out. So I met Johanna Lake an international week at Olomouc in the Czech Republic, and there we initiated our corporate agreements, between the universities. And then because she didn't know anyone in Spain. So she asked me if we wanted to come. And I said, okay, so I accept the invitation, and I thanks Joanna for this. But then, so the idea was to prepare something about multiculturalism and interculturalism in the Canary Islands. But what I want to tell you is that I work at the Faculty of Science Education, and we have got infant, primary, and social studies, okay, at that faculty. And so here, I'm learning. So the attitude I've got here is learning all you have presented and to disseminate at our faculty, because we've got social studies. That's our main objective here. And at the same time, we have been invited to participate in an Erasmus project as well, and that we have presented very recently, was in March. And so we're looking for a positive answer at the moment. And in this case, we're going to work with different European countries as well. And the idea is to work on art, music, and language at the different educational levels. Okay, so all that the attitude that we are here is to learn, and all we learn here, so we can to disseminate and probably include or invite, to participate in the next project. And also, while we that's have already talked about that, and that's the same thing. And so, while I was listening to you, so I wanted to present at the university. We've got Univers Social. That maybe that's the part of the university that should be here today, because we were at the Department of Didactics. So, but our main learning is not social studies. It's to teach English as a foreign language. So it's like, but at the Universal Social, so they have got different projects, and as I told you, well, I was listening to you. So they have got a project, that there is the relation between the students at the university and seniors, okay, and they teach ICT tools, okay, so it's the same, it's more or less the same idea, but a different level, okay, so that's, if you want, so, because we're going to give the presentation, so you can check it. And now we're going to get into the more academic part, because when we prepare this talk, we thought, okay, so we've got our theory framework as a revision, and then the Canarian details about facts and figures in the Canaries about migrants. Okay.
Well, so multiculturalism and interculturalism are two different concepts, but they are related, well, because they both deal with the coexistence of different cultural groups, as you know. As you can appreciate in the slide, you have the different definitions of both concepts, and we can say in this sense that the interculturalism defends the diversity, respect, and cultural dialogue, so it implies a plurality of cultures. The multicultural perspective is present in our Canarian reality, as well as in other realities in other communities, and by extension of other European countries, as we have listened to before. In all these countries, immigration has transformed the multicultural and multilingual society. The field in which we are going to focus is the educational area. As Elisa said before, this is the area in which we work. So in this area, the term adopted is interculturality, because it implies the recognition of the different groups and defends the integration of these contributions into the school curriculum. We agree in recognizing the same cultural or educational rights for all groups. The school must not only admit diversity, but it must be enriched by the contributions of other cultures. This would be the difference between multicultural and intercultural. Intercultural education is understood as a pedagogical response to the current need to prepare future citizens to live in a society that is truly multicultural and ideally intercultural, and therefore to train students in the development of a cultural competence, to acquire skills and attitudes that will enable them to function properly in our multicultural and multilingual society. In Spain, because of the economic development at the beginning of the 21st century and of the oppressive conditions existed in other countries, there was a great amount of immigration. So the number of foreign students increased in our educational system. For this reason, at present, there is a vast amount of diversity in schools. However, in the last years, the tendency has changed, and the number of immigrants in the schools have decreased a little bit, probably because of the economic crisis. The predominating countries in non-university studies in Spain are those from South America, as you can see on the slide, Europe and Africa. The autonomous communities in which there is a higher rate of foreign students are Balears, La Rioja, and Catalonia. In the Canaries, we have an increase in the number of foreign students. For example, in course 2014 and 2015, the percentage of foreign students was 6.3. In 2015 and 2016, it was 6.4. And in the following course, the percentage was 6.6. In university studies, the Canary Islands universities, University of La Laguna and University of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria, have a 5.6% of foreign students. It is a number of 2,400 students that come from other countries. Taking into account all these percentages, it is evident that in different regions, students become more ethnically diverse, producing a high level of interaction between cultures. In this context, it must be considered that not all students can be taught in the same way, since their cultures and experiences influence the way they learn and interact with others. According to this definition, well, different organizations, because we have the idea that all students should have an equal opportunity to learn in schools, right? So for this reason, as I said before, different organizations, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, establishes that in order to strengthen democracy, education systems need to take into account the multicultural character of society and aim and actively contribute to peaceful, coexistence and positive interaction between different cultural groups. It implies the support of the education system to multiculturality. Having in mind that the 90% of foreign students in Spain are enrolled in state schools, the government has realized that the natural immersion is not enough to acquire a linguistic competence to support the academic improvement for those foreign students. In this sense, education authorities have the obligation to help foreign students and for this they must provide programs to support this integration to avoid any kind of exclusion and discrimination, recognizing the diverse cultures that exist in our country and developing, implementing, and monitoring policies. Therefore, Spanish government tries to promote and provide solutions to this existing problem. Its main goal is to achieve an intercultural society in which all its members can interact and enrich with exchange among different cultures, promoting tolerance and the omission of racism and xenophobia. In this sense, as above mentioned, education plays an important role. So Spanish government adds educational reforms creating inclusive curricula, including an equitable representation of diversity, since it helps children to know, interact, and collaborate with students from other cultures, preventing the early leaving of foreign students and racism. It is necessary to change the teaching methods, teaching materials, language teaching, school life, and other aspects to attain an intercultural education. The latest study by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, confirms the small but regressive step backwards that has been taken in recent years in the field of school integration of immigrants. This study confirms that schools with higher rates of immigrant children are often located in poor neighborhoods. This is, in the eyes of the OECD, the key to their poor school performance. The education system is not succeeding in neutralizing the social and economic differences between rich and poor students and in distributing the academic results of students regardless of the family background. The fact that the educational, social, and emotional success of immigrant students differs so widely across countries and that countries pursue such different policies and practices in leveraging the potential of immigrant children underlines that there is much that countries can learn from each other.
So because it's just 1 minute left, so, I'm not going to talk about the different laws, so you can see, before is, we have talked about that. There are different measures taken by autonomous communities. All the regions consider interculturally a positive phenomenon that enriches coexistence. They include these measures in the curriculum programs, and they promote the compensatory education and also involve socio-community field in this issue. Yeah. Okay. So what we have here is the figures of the Canaries. So let's move on very quickly, very fast. So we've got, as we mentioned before, there was a 7% of foreign students in 14-15. However, the current and actual situation is that there are some schools with more than a 50% of foreign students belonging to between 20 and 30 different nationalities. Okay, so the top 12 countries of origins of these students are Italy, Morocco, China, United Kingdom, Venezuela, Germany, Cuba, Romania, Colombia, Russia, France, and Portugal. The following table shows the statistics for the Canary Islands in terms of percentage of students enrolled in different levels of education from a variety of nationalities. Okay, so for example, in this one, you can find that in one school, so it's shared like 26 students with different nationalities and 33 no Spanish-speaking students. So there are 2 examples of a school of, that numbers. And this is the law of a school that is called, there you can see in this school there are 35 different nationalities. Okay, so it's a very hard work for teachers. Okay, so and as a final, that's the last measure of the autonomous government called Programa Impulsa. So a means of addressing diversity and encouraging students to succeed in schools and based on the principles of inclusion, promoting equity, and contributing to greater social cohesion. Yes? Yeah. Okay, and now the final.
Yes?
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Okay, thank you.
Muchas gracias. Una exposición muy interesante, el tema de los datos. A continuación va a participar Regina Soremski de la Universidad de Gießen. ¿Es okay? Gießen?
Yeah.
Yeah. De Alemania.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Regina Soremski. I wanted to discuss intergenerational learning within migrant families as a biographical resource for academic success. That seems to be, or might be confusing at the first sight, but it is a different approach to the same problem we discuss here. What does it mean? I also deal with the difficult situation of migrant students at school in Germany from the point of those who already finished school, not as early leavers as they are supposed to be concerning their socioeconomic background, but as achievers. My question is therefore, what can we learn from them? What resources, or which resources did they have? Before I come to my answers, I want to give you a very short overview of the recent situation of immigrant students in the German school system, and I will something about the origin of my data, of the data my findings are based on. If you have a closer look at the PISA 2015 results, we can see at first a positive result. Germany has less low achievers than the EU average. That's at least the case for non-immigrants. If we focus on immigrant students, we see a reverse situation. The group of migrant low achievers is bigger than the EU average, and at least there is a significant gap between first and second generation immigrants. I have no laser pointer, so I hope you can see it. PISA also shows that the performance of students with migrant background is correlated with a socioeconomic background. Next slide. If you have a closer look at the yellow part of the column, which shows the participation in higher secondary school that prepares for university study, it's called in German Gymnasium, you can see that less immigrant students than non-immigrant students visit this school, but almost the same percentage visit this school if they have the same economic background. Against this backdrop, educational inequality persists even from first to second generation of immigrants. But if they succeed and could attain academic qualifications, what can we learn from them? In order to give you an answer, I want to refer to a project, to a research project called Cultural Capital During Migration that we conducted from 2005 until 2008. Our analysis was focused on the importance of educational qualification and residence status during the entry into the labor market. The labor market integration was examined in the context of not only of Germany, but also Great Britain, Turkey, and Canada. Therefore, we did 206 narrative biographical interviews, even 121 in Germany. One part of our sample was the second generation, who were born in Germany and have the same residence status than the native-born population, who went to school in Germany and achieved their university qualification in Germany as well. Within that group, I investigated persons who came from families with low socioeconomic status. They are the so-called guest workers family. They come from the so-called guest workers family. My question was why did they succeed? PISA 2015 identified a number of factors that are related to disparities in learning outcomes, which you might already know. These are stratification policies, the school system is one of the largest factor, concerning language barriers, concentration of immigrant students in school, the permeability of educational pathways, The student's own motivation might be a factor, parent support, personal networks, and parents' professional educational aspirations. These are factors that are always discussed in those literature dealing with the question of educational inequality. I want to focus on the parents' professional educational aspirations, want to compare this with my own findings. One key aspect are the socialization experiences within migrant families. They can influence the school performance of their children. Those experience concerns, for example, the loss of former social status or the non-recognition of foreign qualifications after migration. This you can see in the following manner. Ali Kaplan reported, "My father was a qualified tailor in Turkey, but had to work as an unskilled worker in a mining company, which had a great impact on him. He always said to his children, or preached the sentence almost every day, that I should have a better life." What we can see from a second generation perspective is that they were addressed by their parents as a generation that should have better living and better working conditions. This projected image entails, in fact, an orientation towards compensation of a loss of status during migration, but without saying anything how to manage it. The only fact that they could learn from their parents' experience was that they need a qualification that could compensate this loss of status and that were recognized in the German labor market. Recognition in that sense of an equal treatment therefore became one of the key factors for their school careers. I want to describe this process as a transformation process of orientations in the framework of intergenerational learning. That means parents' experience of non-recognition and the loss of status during migration changed into educational upward mobility orientations of the second generation. This is only one type you can see. I found two other types, which are called transformation of traditional intergenerational family ties and transformation of traditional gender roles, which have the same effect. But I want to concentrate on the first type and want to show you how this transformation of orientation become apparent in the educational career. In doing so, we should continue with the case of Ecehan Çelik. Her educational career starts in the kindergarten, continues at primary school, where she performed very well, but then ends in the lower secondary school, like most of their migrant peers in the 1970s. It was only when Ecehan Çelik were informed by her classmate that this school ends with a vocational-oriented qualification. And that's why she went with her mother, or together with her mother, to the rector's office and asked for access to the secondary school that prepare for university studies. And this episode was reported by her in the following manner. The school rector said that the test was finished already, but he can see that my grades were not bad. Only the spelling skills I still had to practice. Okay, let's see, what do you know? I will ask you two questions. How to spell rhythm? And so I spelled the word, and then he said, I see you have still known. Well, you have passed. An orientation of recognition of qualification became also relevant in the school context, especially for a mother. But what we can also see in this interview is the predominance of the official language as a kind of normative order, or as a structural discrimination of migrant students. In order to overcome this discrimination, it does not only need parents, like the mother of Angelic, who are informed about the German school system, who resist those institutional barriers, and also who foster their children to get access to the broader school milieu that will be a relevant factor to foster their school career. However, such efforts and claims will fall short. Yes. Okay. If we want to develop integrative and active solutions, so we have to ask what remains to be done. That will be my last slide. What remains to be done is to ensure language support for students and also teachers to resist the monolingual habitus of school, in the sense of recognition of language skills as a resource for society, to inform about education and career pathways, to increase the flexibility and permeability of educational pathways, to promote a culture of inclusion in schools where diversity is gradually increasing and should also increase among the teaching staff, I would say. In Germany, we have a development since the last 10, 15 years where the schools or transform into an all-day school. All schools, especially primary schools, should become an all-day school. They want to the first target in a political sense is to reduce educational inequality, but this development is still under investigation, so I cannot say something about if this works or not. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Bueno, nuestro siguiente ponente es Ana.
Yes.
Ana, okay. Ana de la Universidad de Lot. Cuando quieras.
Buenas tardes a todas y todos. Estoy muy feliz que puedo estar aquí contigo, pero porque hablo solo un poco español, vamos a continuar en inglés. Lo siento mucho, próxima vez en español. Okay, so today I would like to say a few words about another Erasmus program, another Erasmus project which called Youth School Forum Project. I developed with Joanna as well. So the main idea of the project is how to develop the approach, which call participatory approach into the school. And firstly, I will say a few words. What does it mean, participatory approach? Probably few of you, maybe most of you, know what does it mean, but anyway, I will say a few words about it. So in our context, the participatory approach was defined as including children in decisions which affect their lives, the life of the community and wider society in which they live. It includes supporting children and young people in thinking about their business in effective expression of their opinions and positive interaction with other people. What does it mean? We try to fight against the approach which divide people into the category adult and young. We would like to see the young people and adult people on the same position. So it means that we would like to apply into the school the approach where everybody are equal and can have say and change something into the real life. So as I say, the participatory approach to working with children or youth is the approach that people legally categorized as minors are not passive participants of the process of socialization, but legitimate member of the society who, just like adults, create it and have the ability to transform it. Taking the above into consideration, their role in any aspect of life should not be limited, but should be active. Participatory and generally critical approach stand in opposition to the order in which age is sharp boundary determines skills, abilities, or rights of people. Regarding this way of setting the boundary as unfair for young people, as it suggests their developmental is incomplete, and thus they are irrational as human beings. So we believe that the young people can make decisions in their own life. They have ability to speak their own voice, and they do not need to be protected by adults, even if they make a mistake. Because a mistake create us as a human beings, and through our experience and mistakes we can learn something. So it's not like that when we finish 18 years old, we start to be adult. We start to be adult and responsibility from early beginning. So if somebody doesn't allow me to make my decision in my own, so in age of 18, apparently I will not be able to make a decision in myself, because I will still be limited by previous way of thinking. So I need to learn. How to make a decision from the early beginning, not in the age of 18. So this is our idea that students, pupils, and youth should have a possibility to make a decision in their own and speak in their own voice. Okay, so generally, participatory approach is a practical way of to democratization of education, but also social relation. It changed everything in the schools, because the traditional approach which divided in the school the people on the teacher who has power and the pupils who has not power but are under the power, it changed everything, because now it means that we are on the equal position. Participatory approach is practical way for individuals to explore the nature of their activity and improve it. So it means that we would like to give possibility to be active and to implement our own idea into the life, especially in the context of the project into the life in the school. Participatory approach encourages practitioner youth to become knowledge makers rather than merely knowledge users. So it means that one moment, because why we intend to do the Project Future Youth School Forum, we perceive the current approach in the school as not effective, because pupils just sit down in the class and they listen when teachers say something, but they do not have a possibility to learn something more. They do not have a chance to explore the field. They do not have a possibility to be more critical for the knowledge given by the teachers. So we would like to change it, and we would like to create kind of body, we call it forum. So it means during the forum, pupils meet each other, and they speak about the problems in the school, about the ideas, what they would like to change, what they would like to do for themselves, for the school, and for the wider community. It was our idea, and also we would like, our idea was to give a power for forum to make a decision. So it means that teacher and director listen the pupils and follow the decision which were made during the forum. It was our idea. What I have learned, what we have learned from this project, it's not so easy to implement the participatory approach into the school. So we are in the end of our project, so now we are more wiser. We know more, so our enthusiasm is not so high as it was when we started, but we have many conclusions what we should change, and maybe in another project we will do better. So firstly, difference of expectation of the level of participation. And it's not only like that, that we thought that pupils will be so engaged because the participatory finally give them a chance to be active, to be on the same level as a teacher. But no way. They used to do, like in the traditional approach, they know school as a place where they are pupils and they need to learn from the teacher, not as a people who give the knowledge, who had some kind of experience which can share with others. So they were not able from the early beginning to change their way of perception. So it means teacher is teacher. And it's not so easy if you say me in one moment that teacher, it's your colleague, it's your friend, it's a human like you. It's not so easy because it's a question of our mentality, and we need a lot of time to change it. Necessity of understanding of youth and teacher perspective. It's also something what we didn't take into account from the early beginning. So it means that we have good idea, brilliant idea, I can say, even though. But we are not the practitioners. We are not the practitioner. We are the people who develop some project, but we do not know reality so good as a practitioner, as a teacher. So if we would like to, we think right now that from the early beginning we should involve the people who, for who we would like to work and with who we want to work in the future. Because without it, it is only our idea, it is only our perspective, but without the perspective of the other participants, it's not possible to develop good project. I think right now. Prevention from pushing forward adult perspective. It was also something very, very important for us because we, as I say, for us youth and pupils who currently are on the lowest position than teacher and other, they afraid to speak what they really want to do in the school, or they do not have idea what they want to do in the school. So adults' perspective was still the most visible in the project. So I don't know. I do not have the answer for that question. What we can do if we want to make the perspective of the pupils more visible and to give them power to speak about it loudly. So it's the questions without answer. I'm sorry for that. Necessity for reducing the effective of asymmetric relationship and empowering youth. So it's very connect with the point which I mentioned before, so I will skip it. So conclusion, so last slide. As you see, I speak very fast, not like my colleague, very slowly. So participatory approach is not only a method of work, but mostly the philosophy which affects on human relation. It seeks to understand the world by trying to change it collaboratively and following the reflection. Taking all into account, the main question is, are we really ready for that? I don't know. Are we ready? But I suppose we should try and try and try to make this world more democratic. And it is important to ask ourselves, participation for what? Because sometimes we just like this approach because it's fashion, it sounds good, but what we want to do, what we want to really do with it. Sometimes we use it, but we use it to make our school more, how to say it, more democratic, yes, it could be, but it's like a teaser for the adults, but it's not real participation. So, muchas gracias por su atención. Dziękuję bardzo.
Muchas gracias, Ana. Bueno, pues vamos a cerrar ya esta mesa con la última participación de Jesús Romero, de la Universidad Autónoma de Madrid.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for this kind invitation to give this presentation. I am a linguist, so I'm going to put forward some linguistic perspectives on the attitudes and the feelings of and emotions of migrants and refugees. So this is the outline of my presentation. I would like first to start by assessing reality. There's a premise I would like to put forward first. The thing is, what do we listen to when we're talking to migrants and refugees? I think very often we do have a more transactional attitude in the sense that we are interested in what they want, what they need, what they lack, rather than having an interactional communication attitude in which we try to understand how they feel. Now, I think very often when they come to Europe, when they come to Spain certainly, we do have a more objective attitude rather than a more subjective idea of what their feelings and what their background is. So this is why having this premise, language is the only window to the mind, I would like to put forward. I would first like to show this video just for...
How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Go!
Now, as the title, as it says, it's very easy to miss what we're looking for. Now, I think what we're looking for when we're talking about refugees and migrants is precisely to understand how they feel and how we can, let's see if this loads. It's loading, yes. Okay, let me go ahead. Oh, sorry, I just want to skip this. So I would like to start first by asking, what's in a name? There's a current situation in which we have massive displacement of populations worldwide with accompanying problems of adjustment, physically, economically, culturally, as well as psychologically. The problem is how not to lose your soul, that is your background, your feeling, your mentality, when your body is crossing boundaries. Migrants leave their home, their relatives, their friends behind, and also their names. There's this interesting anecdote written by Jacob May, who's himself a migrant, in which he says that Jacob Cemetery, born in March 1882, arrived in the port of New York on board of this boat from Antwerp. He left behind not only his native country, then Russia, but also his native name. He was registered and later naturalized as Jake Smith. It is something that we notice daily at schools and universities. Migrants and refugees have to learn a new language. But cannot we learn their names, their pronunciation, and their spellings? I think it's something that we must ask our teachers to do, to learn how the names are pronounced and written. For example, I have a story of two Syrian sisters, refugees, who are now in Spain, and they came to Madrid, and they registered with different surnames because the transcription from the Arabic was different, because it was done by two different officials. Now they have tremendous problems now as regards paperwork in how they register, how they look for help, etc. So let's understand the narratives of distance. I think something important when migrants come, and somebody mentioned it before, is they look for a better life. Now there's the question of happiness. There's this very interesting paper in this journal, the Journal of Happiness Studies, in which Roman Hoare described immigrants' happiness as the result of the fulfillment of human needs, including basic physiological needs, and the needs for safety, love, and belonging, esteem, and personal growth. Now, how can we measure this? How is it possible to understand if somebody is happy or not? I would propose one theoretical linguistic model that I use. This is part of my research and the research of my colleagues, which is the natural semantic meta-language, which was developed in Australia mainly, because, as you know, in Australia there are many migrants. So the idea is to examine human cognition and emotions from a non-arbitrary and non-ethnocentric perspective. So same emotions are realized differently according to cultures and languages. I have some quotes that you can then check in the presentation that I will upload. So this is basically the idea of the ethnopragmatics of language. There are some semantic primes and cultural scripts, that is, the situations and concepts that we all have, and let's say take from one language into another, or take from one country to another, in which, for example, we analyze the notion of beauty, the notion of happiness. And for example, there's a recent article in the book on the analysis of sadness in Chinese, how Chinese people reflect sadness linguistically and emotionally differently. So when we have children at school who come from China, if we don't know this, we may not understand what they're going through, okay, because they express sadness differently. Just to give you an example, we have carried out an analysis of the positive and negative emotions in Irish immigrants' letters, recently published a couple of years ago, in which we analyzed the conceptualization of the narratives of Irish migrants in the US and their expression of happiness and sadness. We used this methodology, the natural semantic meta-language, and we analyzed the concepts of happy and sad, and glad and unhappy and sad. We analyzed 2,106 narratives, personal letters, counting up to over 2 million words, and we analyzed them according to the unit of analysis that we call the Prague mean, which is the situated speech act, in which the rules of language combine with the rules of society and context. And we analyzed their happiness and sadness in different contexts, such as family, religion, leisure, finance, friends, etc. Now, what is the account of this? So we saw that most of the emotions that immigrants expressed in their letters were positive. You can see the percentages there: happy, glad, unhappy, and sad. And it was also interesting to see that most of the happiness positive expressions related to their relationship with people they met in the host country, as well as with the context, and then activities and others. Now we can see that the role that the emotional negative account of negative emotions related to activities and other fields like finance, labor, etc., which is, I think, the sort of context that we have to promote in our communities, okay? Not so much people, because they normally gather with people who are, positive towards them, but also trying to foster other sorts of activities. In this sense, we've also carried out studies on the analysis of migrants' conversation. I would like to report on this very recent paper in the journal Corpus Pragmatics, in which a colleague of mine investigated 48,000 words of English as a lingua franca in an asylum-seeking center in Ireland, in which all the communication was carried out in English by people who were not native English speakers, but English was the lingua franca. This study was carried out on a database of over 3 years. In the results, what we found is that of all the lists of words, the first 300 words constitute 80% of the vocabulary of the lingua franca. The first 100 words account for 60% of the total words, and these results were then compared with English used by native speakers. Now, this is used currently in Ireland to see what is the language that has to be taught at language schools for migrants, because there's an overestimation of the number of words that they currently use, which is completely different from the language they should use when they leave the center. So we very frequently find that these people having a sort of closed environment in the asylum-seeking center, when they go out, they lack basic skills, basic linguistic skills. There was also a presentation before in which language was considered one of the key issues as to the, let's say, the success at school. Now, the conclusions is that we have to analyze the lingua franca used by these migrants when they arrive, and then see what is how to compare this with the real language outside. Now, as regards the cognitive research, we're also working on the emotions of migrants. Now, what we see is that fear is one of the key issues. It was mentioned before by our Polish colleague, but also there's the question of what is the experience that they've carried out as refugees. Now, as I say here, refugees flee from situations involving fear, war, terror, natural disasters. And in the asylum process, this recount of what is their experience is normally carried out with the help of interpreters. Now, the narratives, when they have to relive again, experience what they suffered, it causes a mental blockage when they recall their experiences. There was a recent article in the New York Times, 16th March, just 1 month ago, not even 1 month, on the recollections of violence suffered by Yazidi women in Canada. The interviews were carried out in their native language with the help of an interpreter, and they simply blocked up, and they were not able to recount what was happening. Now, there's a recent paper, which is already in press in scientific reports, in which they found that it is better to make, in the asylum process, it is better to help asylum seekers not to recount their experiences in their mother tongue, if possible, if they have a second language, because psycholinguistically speaking, you don't get the same emotions. It's proven that when you recount your emotions in your second language or in your third language, you don't live these experiences so lively, so it is better for them not to break down emotionally and try to use the second language. In this sense, it is very important, for example, in the case of Spain, to teach Spanish properly to migrants, as well as in the Irish example, how to teach them to good English so they can express their emotions in English when it comes to tell bad background experiences. So what is the proposal as a linguist and as an observer of all this? I think we have to compile a corpus of narratives and interviews of the people we already have with us. We have to be able to analyze the emotional load of words and what they have in their minds. We have to design tailor-made language teaching methods to alleviate traumas and foster integration. This is what, as I said, what is being done at the moment in cognitive linguistics, in corpus linguistics, as regards how migrants and refugees integrate, as I said, not only socially, but also linguistically. And thank you very much. This is my contact webpage.
Muchas gracias, Jesús. Bueno, pues vamos llegando al final de la jornada. Una jornada densa, que no quiere decir que no interesante. Y bueno, pues llega el momento en que pues cualquiera de las personas que estáis aquí, si queréis plantear alguna duda, pregunta, opinión.
Bueno, era para el primer ponente. Primero felicitarles y gracias por tan interesantes exposiciones. El primer ponente había hablado de el tema de un cambio a nivel sistémico, social e individual. Pues quería saber cuál era la principal diferencia entre ese cambio a nivel sistémico y social, ¿no? Porque pareciera a veces que se habla de lo mismo, pero en esencia, ¿cuál era la diferencia desde esa postura sistémica que él planteaba?
¿Por alusiones?
¿Era el primer ponente?
Sí. Aquí. Le pasamos.
I heard a question, but I don't know. I take the idea, so please correct me if I answer another question. It was about systemic level of disempowerment and what are the changes or what is the change. And I think that the crucial change, considering individual and social empowerment and systemic empowerment, is that in the framework of the first one, we work with people from neglected neighborhoods, vulnerable groups, and so on. At the level of systemic empowerment, we work with the rest of people, not with those who are migrants or seniors or other. So it was the reason that I divided it into two categories. Of course, there are many more details in this analysis, but probably other would like to tell something also. It was the answer to the question? Yeah.
Muchas gracias. ¿Alguien más quiere participar o de los propios ponentes, si queréis añadir algo? ¿Nadie más? Bueno, pues si
If I can, I only would like to add great thanks to interpreters who really did the job very well, and I have understood everything what was taught in Spanish.
Sí, la verdad es que es un trabajo duro y complicado. Muchas gracias. Bueno, pues si no queréis comentar nada más, agradeceros a todos los que habéis participado, que habéis estado toda esta mañana, que yo creo que ha sido muy interesante, densa, pero muy interesante. Y bueno, pues dar las gracias a todo el equipo mío que ha estado detrás, Asun, Joaquín, que anda por aquí, Asia, Raquel, Aira, y a todos los socios que han estado participando, que han permitido que se desarrollara este proyecto. Y bueno, pues a todos los asistentes que habéis participado y habéis mostrado vuestro interés en conocer este proyecto. Como os comentaba antes, Asun, pues la información la colgaremos en la página web para todos aquellos que estéis interesados. Y bueno, pues en breve nos veremos en cualquier otro proyecto europeo, porque nos parece que es interesante la labor de diseminación y que bueno, las entidades conozcáis de primera mano todos estos trabajos y estas actividades que vamos desarrollando. Simplemente recordaros que nos interesa que ahora nos dejéis las encuestas de satisfacción, la valoración, que bueno, pues a nosotros nos es muy interesante, como os comentaba antes, algunos de los participantes de la jornada los hemos elegido en función de sugerencias que nos han hecho personas que han participado en otras reuniones, y nos parece interesante pues eso, saber vuestra opinión sobre lo que se ha desarrollado aquí, cosas que podemos mejorar. Y nada, pues os entregaremos simplemente un pequeño certificadito reconociendo pues vuestra participación en esta jornada. Y eso, muchas gracias a todos y hasta la próxima. Muchas gracias.